Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started. Hello and welcome to the WCL Ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles Port of Entry Supply Chain Meltdown Causes, Symptoms, and Solutions story. Please note the correct title is Port of Entry. It's not just the ports of LA Long Beach. We're talking about the entire port of entry of the network of goods movement people. I'm John DeCesare, president of WCL Consulting. If you are like me, you appreciate understanding a speaker's qualifications. Well, let me tell you, my story started 50 years ago. In 1971, I was the import distribution manager for Kawasaki Motors, headquartered in Irvine, California. At the time, our imports were growing at more than 35% per year. I spent a good amount of my time working with our 3PL drayage partner regarding marine terminal operations. After 10 years, I left Kawasaki to become president of a 3PL company based at the Port of Long Beach, which operated 100 drayage trucks. Our business was focused on handling time-sensitive consumer goods imports. In 1985, I started a supply chain advisory firm. One of our early engagements involved marine terminal drayage operations interface improvements. Subsequent to that one, a number of projects related to the port of entry included the Port of Long Beach cargo diversion study, Target Store's high volume transload operations improvements, PurePass 1.0 and 2.0 implementation community outreach, Port of Long Beach free flow terminal operations assessment, Rio Tinto SoCal Drayage Industry Market Report, the first and only of its kind, and the BNSF SoCal Transload Market Study. Like rungs on a ladder, the higher you step with each engagement, the clearer you see. Let's cover the agenda now. It's very brief. So the background, I've given you my background experiences. Next, I will briefly talk about the Port of LA Long Beach at a high level. I'll talk about the Chinese example of a Chinese world-class port operation, and then I'll dive down into the global supply chain stakeholders network and how that's structured and what that's like. All the causes of this meltdown are far too numerous to cover during this short talk. I will highlight some that I feel are significant. The good solutions, the good news is that the SoCal ports and terminal operators have rewritten the history books with numerous action steps. I will tell you about some I would prioritize. My conclusion that you'll hear about is the reality is that our global supply chain woes didn't start during the pandemic. The pandemic just stoked the embers of existing issues into one roaring fire. There are numerous systemic issues throughout the goods movement network at our port of entry. Even though I don't consider myself an expert in the SoCal port of entry complex goods movement world, I understand many of the nuances. My challenge is to distill this complex situation and its solutions within a 35-minute time frame. Let's get started. Background. The ports of LA Long Beach, just as I want to make sure our viewers understand the dynamism of this port. 7,800 acres of land, 100 rail intermodal trains go in and out of these terminals. The terminals each day. It would be the 9th busiest port complex in the world by container volume. They're managed by the city of LA and city of Long Beach, unlike China ports, which are managed by the government. There's 17,000 drayage trucks that authorized to deliver or pick up containers. More than $1.5 billion per day of commerce flows through these. I sometimes have to smile when you're in a conversation about economic engines in a city, if it's a hospital or a university or manufacturing site. But you talk about an economic engine, these ports are phenomenal at $1.5 billion per day commerce. The landlord, they're an operating landlord model that you have two types of port models. There's the operating model, which Charleston and Savannah are actually operating ports, where you have a landlord model like LA Long Beach, and their landlord ports where they build the infrastructure, they build the terminals, the highways, the bridges, and then they lease the terminals to independent companies, long-term leases. One of the complexities about this gateway is we have 11 marine container terminals. You look across the United States at Houston or Savannah or Charleston or New York or Seattle, they're more in the range of anywhere from 4 to 6 terminals. So it's less challenging from the landside operation for the train operators and the trucking operators to interface with the fewer terminals. What's unique about LA Long Beach, they are a mega vessel load center. That means the ultra large vessels prefer LA Long Beach and route a lot of their ships through here because they have we have our large population base, consumer base, 24 million in the Southwest area. We have very sophisticated rail connectivity, highway connectivity. We have more than 1.5 billion square feet of warehouses to catch the product as it comes in off these big ships. Let's turn now and look to the west and look to China. I was fortunate to tour this terminal once it came online. Shanghai in early 2000 was located up a long, narrow, busy river, and they realized that they could not handle the mega vessels as they gradually evolved in global trade. So they said, we have to build a bigger, better terminal, and they identified an island about 20 miles off the coast, and they said, well, their engineer says, we can go to that island, we can level it, and we'll build a marine terminal out there. And they did it, and they did it in 3 years, which is incredible time. Sometimes it takes in the United States 3 years to get just environmental approval, let alone to build something this big. Again, they spent $18 billion on the structure. It has the capacity to handle 25 million TEUs. It's the longest ocean bridge, 20 miles across the sea. The longest, a little trivia, is built from Hong Kong to Macau. That's the very longest bridge that was built across the open ocean. But this terminal is not only large, it's automated, it works 24/7. So on my various trips to China, when I would tour some of their terminals, it was in Shenzhen or Shanghai or wherever, I couldn't help but think these are like giant fire or water cannons that were all built and focused to the West Coast. And I said, if China ever turns those cannons on all together, they will drown the West Coast terminals because there's so much power in China's investment in terminal infrastructure that, and sure enough, when they turned it back on as we bounced back from COVID, that's what happened. They had the ability, plus working 24/7. So what is this? This is a graphic, what we intended to show the global supply chain goods movement stakeholders. I call it the cast of characters. These are the people in the industries that get involved when a company buys products in Asia and they move it across the United States. So the far left of the graphic is the factories, representing the factories in Asia, and it takes the trucks, the forwarders, to move them to the marine terminals, into the ports to be loaded on ships, moving from left to right. And then you see the ports would be LA Long Beach, our terminals, our railroads, our trucking. So many import shipments go through 12 to 15 different stakeholder industries to get to the United States. This world has been it's dependent on each other, upstream and downstream, but they so often act independent. They develop processes and strategy changes within their silo of their world. And too frequently, even up to today, they were doing this 40 years ago, but even today we have too many cases where something designed by one industry and it doesn't have a positive impact as it's brought online downstream or upstream. Very complex, very dynamic, very changing all the time. It's not an easy route to get your product from Asia to the US. One of the biggest shortfalls is real-time visibility. That importers need real-time visibility, and it was proven from the COVID situation that if they can't see where the issues are, they can't solve the issues. So there's been a big push to improve that ability. So these are the guys I'm going to be talking about. I'm not talking about the factories and what happened over there. I'm not talking about the far right where the stores, the retail stores, what happened there. So my focus of today's remarks are in this area called the port of entry. So here's another macro element in the world of global trade. The ships are big and they're getting bigger. According to Alphaliner, 30 super jumbo container vessels with capacities above 21,000 TEUs are expected to launch in 2023. That's not far off at all. And so the terminals, the ports, the processes, everything needs to be geared up for this tsunami of trade coming at us through these mega vessels. So what are some causes? Let's spend a few minutes on what caused this meltdown. What caused all the supply chain nodes to melt or fall apart? So of course, number one is going to be the pandemic. Number one will be the COVID pandemic. When that struck the world in early 2020, late 2019, it like flipped the switch on so many things. It flipped the off switch on factories in Asia, terminal operators in Asia, ocean carriers, railroads, trucking companies, terminal operations, and everything started going dark as you looked across the world and you said, where's the goods movement people, what's happening? And then compliments in the United States, I'm talking about specifically, is that when the US government distributed the stimulus money to bring back the economy, all the people isolated in homes got this urge to buy, and they said, no, we're coming back. We want to buy things. Even though we're isolated at our home, we're going to buy into e-commerce. And it's been said that in 2.5 years of e-commerce, they experienced a growth of almost what it taken, forecasted to take 5 years. It accelerated that fast with e-commerce. Here you can see the major spike in volume that happened. The red, January 20th, February 20th, that's the COVID lockdown. That's when things were still off and shutting off, maybe coming on temporarily, but then switching back off. And then July 20th is when somebody flipped the switch and said, bring the product, we want to buy the product. And the volumes doubled at the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles from March 20th to May 21st. That increased in volume. They backed up supply chains to factories in Asia and at warehouse doors. And what this does, if you think about it, when you increase volume in anything, if it's a restaurant, if it's a stadium, even the human body, when you increase volume, like on a treadmill stress test, the weaknesses of the system are revealed. And as this volume went up, it really revealed some of the current processes and operational interfaces were not at a level of sophistication they needed to be to handle this efficiently. So corporations during the same period was changing their inventory strategy. Two things were impacting them: e-commerce and the highly competitive nature of the retailers fighting for business in e-commerce. More or less said, we have to have a higher level of inventory. We have to have a higher level of safety stock, because the last thing we need to be is out of stock on something where a customer would just say, well, I'm not buying from them, I'm going to buy over here, and they would lose that customer maybe forever. And the second inventory strategy was, and the one that lasted for a long time, was just-in-time inventory, where they had lean inventory in the warehouses and they were betting on standard transit times. They said, no, we can't do that anymore. We have to be a just-in-case type thing, and they built their safety stock. So these two inventory changes increased the amount of imports coming through the pipeline through the Southern California ports. We hear a lot about one group of stakeholders saying the reason the freight's not moving, there's a shortage of drayage drivers. And that's been debated and debated. But my contention as a neutral party is there's not a shortage of drayage drivers. There's a shortage of drayage productivity. The terminal appointment system is not working the way it needs to. Drivers cannot return empties. That sometimes they can, sometimes they can't. So they're not getting dual transactions. They're not taking one container one way and pulling another. The extensive turn times in the terminals is way out of line. Traditionally, drivers would get 2 to 3 turns a day. For over 2 years, they've been getting 1 turn a day. So you can imagine the productivity there when you go from 2 turns a day to 1 turn a day. And also the chassis mismatch, the complex chassis system makes it less efficient for trucks and dispatchers to route those trucks efficiently. So here's the big ship. It's phenomenal. They said Benjamin Franklin came to town and changed the dynamics, and Benjamin Franklin sure did. On 2015, the ports of LA, Long Beach got to experience one of the early big ships. I look on it back because during this time, the early 2000, both ports of LA and Long Beach were advertising in the trade journal, full page ads. We are big ship ready. We are big ship ready. And they were kind of unique. Not every port, nor could they. They weren't really big ship ready. The channels weren't dredged deep enough, nor the terminals large enough, nor the ship to shore cranes big, tall enough. But Long Beach was, LA was, and they'll say, be careful what you wish for, because here they come. And what they did is they really tested the processes in the terminals. And my contention, and I'm not a terminal engineer, I've done some work looking at the interface between terminals and land operations, but the terminal processes were not geared for this type of volume. They quickly adjusted. They quickly got to that through bigger gates, automation here and there. So, but this is going to stay in the pipeline and will continue to grow in the pipeline. So, everybody along the way has to adjust their processes to handle this type of volume. Marine terminals and gridlock. This was a picture. This is a picture. If we went down there today, we'd see the volume was backing up. The railroads were not taking the intermodal loads off the docks fast enough, nor were the local warehouses able to take import cargo. So it started backing up at the terminals, and excuse me, they were not able to. Many times you'd hear stories where they'd start unloading a ship, and they actually had to stop unloading because they didn't have any more room in the terminal until some trucks came in and was able to take some stuff out. So this was never seen before in the history of Southern California. I've been here for a long time, and I used to work inside the terminals on different projects and familiar with some of the terminal operators, but this was a horrendous challenge when it just started backing up the way it did. Another problem with LA or West Coast versus Asia is the Asian terminals are working 24/7. Our terminals in Southern California in particular operate at 2 shifts, 4 days per week, 1 shift on Friday and Saturday. That's generally how they operate. So there's significantly less time where they're producing loads. So this diagram is just illustrating where it's like 10 lanes of traffic coming into 3 or 4 lanes of traffic. That's why you're seeing ships at anchor, and you have seen and continue to see in Southern California. Another issue, when you compare the Asian terminals, marine terminals with our terminals, both West Coast and East Coast, the yellow bars representing yellow, first one on the left is Long Beach, LA, and then the New York, and then it just shows the amount of containers handled. Generally speaking, the Asian ports are 50 to 70% more productive than Asia. So they're generating higher volumes in the pipeline onto the ships, shipping them towards us, and that's why we can get behind easily if the volume goes up. So the bottlenecks that pushed the freight back and kept it at the terminals was the warehouses were full. They were hurting for workers. They couldn't get over the road trucks, as many as they needed to ship the product out. The rail terminals in Chicago and Kansas and Dallas were backing up somehow. Why the the shipper was not, or the consignee was not taking the inbound product. So that just pushed the product back again towards the ports where you saw that heavily chock-a-blocked photo of that marine terminal. The chassis, these are the devices that have really hurt the flow of cargo, the shortage of these chassis. And when the empties started backing up, empty containers were not being returned. At one time we had 50 to 100,000 empty containers in Southern California. A good number of those empty containers had chassis under them. They were sitting in yards waiting to move the empties out, which took chassis out of the inventory that were needed to move the loads off the terminals. So you had a crisscross of problems. One problem in one area created multiple problems in another. Solutions. Let's talk about a few solutions. And there are many problems, there has to be many solutions, but here's a few. This is focused only on the port of entry stakeholders. The green indicates what the ports of LA, Long Beach, and marine terminals have tested, implemented, prototype, or are currently doing. So they've done some different things. There's still some things, in my opinion, they should consider. The ones I would say they should continue to increase incentives to accelerate container flows. Second, they should conduct a chassis pool process audit. I remember when we talked years ago here that we were going to have a gray chassis pool and it was going to be so much more efficient for the movement of cargo. And that, in my opinion, that never materialized. So some independent party needs to take a look at how this current chassis pool work or doesn't work. And I feel they need to conduct an inland port feasibility study. This is, we have the Alameda Corridor, $2.5 billion investment. I think the latest numbers I heard, it's at 50% capacity. So that would be the corridor that the trains would go up and out to get to the inland port. The fourth one would be establish a congestion solutions war task force. And I'm saying that because it's that serious, that this is a battle of competing ports and competing gateways. And you need to have, not to pick on politicians, but you just can't have a group of politicians talking about issues. You need them in the meeting, but you need the operating people. And what I've observed in my long-term staying in Southern California is and attending major trade conferences. Southern California is unique in it's clustered, gathered together some of the most knowledgeable, experienced global supply chain people in the world. And I'm saying this is an untapped resource that can slay the dragon and help get us through this crazy period we've been through and keep us out of it in the future. So one of the solutions is the appointment system. The terminals implemented appointment systems so they could better schedule their labor. They had one of the biggest problems where trucks would arrive at different times. They would spike at different times, and they never, either the terminals had too much labor or not enough labor. So they said, we got to have appointments so we'll know how many trucks will come in and how many labor we should schedule. The problem being 11 terminals, they don't have quite 11 different appointment systems, but it's a very challenging system from the trucker's operating standpoint to meet these appointments. They could be in one terminal and they thought maybe it should only take me an hour and a half to get in and out of here and I could get my appointment at 10 o'clock at the other terminal, but they'll be delayed and they'll miss the other terminal. And many of the processes of the terminal says, well, you missed the appointment. You call us back and we'll try to get you an appointment in a day or two. And that just kills the service to the shipper when that happens. And so the whole appointment system needs to be reviewed. And I feel that it needs to be an integrated system. So if a trucker at Terminal A is being delayed, the system should be told from one to the other. This trucker has a 3 o'clock appointment, but he is going to be an hour late. Can he have a 4 o'clock appointment? So the systems are talking to each other. The inland port, I mentioned the rail intermodal. This is a shot of the Alameda Corridor. One thing that would need to be considered for an inland port, as you probably know, South Carolina and Georgia have inland ports that have been fairly successful. The key ingredient in the recipe is state or government funding. These are not profitable without that. And so that would have to be part of the formula to make it a reality in Southern California. But I feel that I need to look at that option going forward. Empty containers. What the community is drowning in empty containers. They're just all over. They're taking up space. If you have 50 to 100,000 empty containers, that's an incredible number. And the steamship lines were not on top of taking them back. It's their equipment. They didn't. They let it build here, and we feel that they need to put a serious penalty to the ocean carriers on this. They need to tell the ocean carriers they need to sweeper vessels come through on a frequent basis, and they need to communicate to the railroads and the ocean carriers not to route by trains empties to LA with an unlimited amount of empties. So this is creating a lot of inefficiencies because of this peak in volume of empty containers. Again, never seen in the history of these ports, this scale of empty containers. The automated marine terminal, there's two in the two harbors. There's Long Beach Container Terminal in Long Beach, and then there's TrayPac in LA. I've been fortunate. I've had 3 tours of Long Beach Container Terminal. I'm sorry, did somebody say, don't you ever get tired of that? I don't get tired of that tour. It's just amazing to see the technology that's at Long Beach Container Terminal. And according to Jim McKenna, the CEO of the Pacific Maritime Association, he said the automated terminals are twice as efficient as the manual terminals. Because the terminals are not able to expand in size. For your information, the way the 2 ports met the growth international trade, they dredged the ocean bottom, the channel bottom, and we used the dredging material to build bigger terminals. They expanded a 200-acre terminal to a 300-acre terminal. They were able to do that by the California Coastal Commission, which said for every acre you dredge up, you have to go up or down the California coast to a natural bay or inlet and retro the inlet back to its natural conditions. And they did that for a number of years, and you would see large dredging equipments in the Newport Beach back bay and back there working, and that was all compliments of one of the ports. But then it came to a point, California Coastal Commission said, stop, that's it, there's no more land to mitigate. And now what they have is what they have, the terminals. So they have to densify, meaning to stack the containers higher in order to handle the continued growth in international trade. Automation is essential to the densification goals. Here's a solution that Amazon tried. And they're still doing it as far as I know. Amazon, for your information, buys 53-foot containers for their domestic transportation. They buy these containers from Asia. So they creatively said, let's load those containers with imports and let's charter a ship. And this one went into Houston and went to a break bulk terminal, wasn't even a container terminal. And this is how they got around the issue. They couldn't keep waiting and waiting for the problems to be solved. Here's an example of Peloton. Peloton at one time was getting so many customers canceling orders. They said, hold it. And they spent $100 million on air freight to fly bikes in from Asia to meet their customer demand. Costco wholesale, they chartered vessels. Not only chartered vessels, they leased containers to help their cargo keep moving. Now these options are very costly. They're not reliable, so it's not a long-term solution, but they had to do something to keep the product moving. So what are the shippers' actions, you might say? Well, there's a number of things that myself and my associates have identified that need to be looked at if they're not looking at it already. The Port of LA has a port optimizer system. I think if your company's not looking in to participate in that, they need to give it a serious look. But you can see, but let me just pick off, since we're limited on time, let me just pick off a few here. This one here, enhance employee model to achieve preferred employer status. I've been in supply chain for 50 years, and I've traveled to warehouses, corporate supply chain offices, and I see too many cases where the employee-employer relationship is not working as well as it should. And there's a lot of great innovative ways to build that relationship stronger than ever. And you can see some leading edge organizations that have done that. If it's a warehouse operation, if it's a 3PL partnership relationship, they've got that focus and they've developed it. It can't be the same old employee slash employer model. It's not going to get it. Labor shortages will continue. It's funny because years ago they said companies would say labor's our number one product. That's our number one competitive goal, and it was more of a saying than something that was done. The second idea should be to conduct a 3PL partnership SWOT analysis. This is where the shipper works with their 3PL partner and does an independent audit and just say what's our strengths, what's our weaknesses, opportunities and threats in this relationship. How can we make it stronger, especially coming off the COVID craziness and everything? And it's timely to do that bumper to bumper review of that partnership. And the last one would be, and I think probably many of you shippers are doing this, to implement a comprehensive risk management program. And that would be to improve the real-time visibility, implementing contingency strategies on your various global supply chain strategies. And that's essential. That was needed before COVID hit, but it's even needed more. So what's next? Well, we got into January. It's amazing. It seemed like we weren't talking that long ago about January 1st, and now we're in the middle of February and we're flying forward. But what we have on the horizon is the ILWU contract expires July 1st. Now we'll see importers who have traditionally front load their imports to try to stay ahead of this, and or divert cargo to other ports, other gateways, as insurance against any labor disruptions in cargo movement. So this is here you thought, well, we're going to hopefully find some clear sailing soon, and then we have this on the horizon. And one of what I've heard about this, a key topic will be automation of terminals, and both sides are planting their feet, it sounds like, on what they will take or not take. So hopefully it'll work out. Hopefully some of the younger ILWU guys will say, yeah, I think we need to support the operations and do that. So keeping my fingers crossed. But look at as we move 2022, excuse me, the vessels are still queuing out off the coast of Southern California. So that issue has not gone away. The far right of this graph shows January 20th. This is where the red indicates loitering or slow steaming further offshore. We haven't taken a bite out of this problem yet. It's a big problem, and it takes time to clear the pipeline. This, of all the nuggets in this story I'm telling you, this is number one. Jonathan Gold, who's a great professional, he's the VP of Supply Chain and Customs Policy, National Retail Federation. In December of last year, he spoke at a Propeller Club Zoom meeting, and he said this, that maybe we need to evaluate whether or not our ports are operating in a manner which truly meets the needs of the 21st century global supply chain. Speaking only for the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, Port of Entry Gateway, this is number one on my list. This needs to be done. Recently, you've heard different people say, I think we need to reconsider the landlord model. Maybe there's something. The terminals don't want the ports to touch the landlord model. They want to leave it as is. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we're losing business. We have, and we're going to continue to lose business. And it's my belief, and I think it's accurate, is that the ports are carekeepers of this incredible infrastructure, multi-billion-dollar investment, and they need to protect it. They need to ask themselves, are we doing the best job we can with today's incredibly demanding supply chain stakeholders world? Can we do better, and how can we do that? So it's time that the ports really take a look at that landlord model. So conclusions. John, what are your conclusions? So number one, the reality is that our global supply chain woes didn't start during the pandemic. The pandemic just stoked the embers of existing issues into one roaring fire. You know, it's I would say it's odd, but it's not odd because you hear reporters or YouTube videos talking about all the disconnects in the supply chain. But I have not heard that often people say these issues that are stopping the efficient movement of cargo were existing before the pandemic. I would take this to the bank. I know firsthand that, and I know quite a bit about Southern California, that these issues existed and they just caught on fire when the pandemic came in, and they need to be better addressed. Second, 2020 and 2021 was a preview of what's to expect in the future if significant changes are not made. We can't go through this again. We have to learn from this. We have to identify the choke points, and we have to correct the processes to remain competitive in the global supply chain. Consumers have higher expectations than ever. Supply chains need to be fundamentally reinvented to meet the demand of today's digital world. Complements of e-commerce, what the customers found acceptable a few years ago is not. We're not even there. We want it when we want it, at the price we want it, at the selection we want it. So I think I have to admit I become that way, and I'm not a big shopper, but I've been conditioned to start expecting that, which is not healthy for supply chain people. So in order to solve problems, you must understand causes of problems. There's a saying that says that if you identify the problems, you're 3/4 of the way to solving the problem. And I've looked at that, heard that repeatedly over the years, but I think it's so true that if you do a good job identifying the causes, and I think one of the mistakes, if I, maybe not to be too critical of our Southern California goods movement people, we don't do a good enough job on understanding the causes. We think we know it, and then we implement something and we go, that didn't give us what I thought it would give us. Maybe an example would be the chassis pull situation we're living with today. And there definitely needs to be a sense of urgency. It's critical to avoid future cargo diversions. We've already seen Port of New York, New Jersey come up in volume. I think I heard that they're matching Long Beach now. And there's other ones, Savannah, Charleston. So fair or not fair, the global competitiveness has thrown the stake down and said, let's play ball, gentlemen. We've got a different ground rules here. And if you don't change, the world doesn't care, because the world will change without you. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We have some time to answer some questions. I want to thank everybody for listening, and I hope you got something from the information. Take good care, stay healthy and safe. Look forward to